Hello everyone, this is Reza and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to focus on fluid simulation, how to create realistic fire effects in Maya. So let's dive straight in. I've got a very simple scene with few walls that I modeled in Substance plugin. In case if you're interested, just look at the video, look it up in my channel. And then I've got a simple prop and a lighter, like a damp cloth or something similar to that, and we're gonna set that on fire. So let's dive straight in. You need to make sure that you're in effects menu, so you have access to all the effects drop downs. Then we are going to go to fluid simulation, 3D container, option box, and let's see what we can do here. So I really don't want to have an emitter. I already have one. So let's go with the default, and we get the fluid container with no emitter. So let's bring it to position. I'm going to switch back to channel box, and maybe in translate X, I'm going to put in 0.2, around 10 units probably in Y. Yep, that sounds about right. 3.5, and going to shrink this container a little, 0.65. Now, quick note about scaling 3D container, probably not the most common thing because, well, I haven't started yet, but once you add resolution or you set resolution for your container, it's probably not a good idea to resize it. Right now, it's okay because I haven't started it. I haven't set the initial resolution for my container. Just so you know, there's another way of scaling the container, and that is gonna up-res or down-res the resolution. This one is going to keep the initial resolution that Maya sets, which is 10 voxels. All right, now I have this. So let's switch to attribute editor, and now and only now I'm going to give this a base resolution. I'm gonna keep this fairly low. A common mistake amongst artists is they think the higher the resolution get, the better everything looks. That's really not the case. Yes, the more complex the simulation get, but not necessarily comes with the look that you want. So I'm just going to keep it simple. 40 voxels will do just fine. And let's connect that container to the model that we have. So I'm going to select the containers, already been selected, shift select the lighter, and then go to fluids, add edit contents, and emit from object. If I look at inside of the option box, these are the things that I can change later. Just need to make sure that emits type set to surface, name it properly, source sounds like a perfect name, apply and close. Now you can see that under lighter, now my emitter lives, and everything is connected through connection editor to this container right here. That's why the channels are yellow, and you're not kind of supposed to change any of that. Now let's go and enable temperature. We're using fire after all, and we do need temperature for that. Now to access temperature, you always go to fluid, and it's much easier to use attribute editor rather than channel box, and you can see temperature is off. So I'm going to set it to dynamic grid, so every grid can be can get calculated. If I play, I get something very similar to density. In fact, I do have density, but I have temperature as well. Easy to see actually in here in display with the fluid container selected. If I go into temperature and play, you can see that I in fact have temperature. The reason that it's white because the default color for temperature is white. Gonna switch this one back to as render, make sure not turn it off by accident, and rewind. Now we have the temperature enabled. That amount of resolution is really bugging me. So while we're in display, I'm gonna go to boundary draw and set this to none, so I can't see it. Every time I want to select it, I'm going to select it through the outliner. It's much easier. Now I noticed that if you were to play this, it kind of hits the boundaries very quickly, especially boundary Y. And that's not a problem really. You don't want to set -1 boundary, or you don't want to set the boundaries to none, but you do want to make sure that the simulation gets more efficient and faster. Right now, if I were to bring back this boundary draw, all of these empty negative space that we have within this fluid 1 shape node will get calculated. And that's waste of memory, and we don't really need that. So best thing to do is to go to Auto Resize and actually enable Auto Resize. I'm a huge fan of this option because now only this area that we have simulation gets calculated, and the simulation is going to be just a tad faster. I'm going to go back to display and set the boundary draw to none. I really don't want to see it. Now, next step is to increase my substeps. So if I go to, with the fluid container selected, if I go to dynamic simulation, there is substeps here, and this is going to be relatively fast, and I do need some substeps to kind of fill the gap. So set this one to 2, maybe increase the solver quality to something like 25. Don't make it too high, otherwise again it defeats the purpose. It will slow down your simulation, and don't change that substep too aggressively because the look of your simulation will change dramatically. So I kind of advise against that. If I play right now, again, I don't see much of a change because we really don't have enough resolution. We don't have enough temperature, density, so on and so forth. So we need to change a few things. With the Auto Resize on, let's polish the heart of our simulation, and that is contents detail. Now, this is something that you kind of need to master it over time, and you need to know what option does what. And I know it's a bit intimidating. It's a very long list, but I try to put together just a video for that alone because a lot can go into this. Now, for now, let's get to the point really quickly in our density. It's going to increase buoyancy to 10. This will rise faster. And diffusion, we don't need to blur it, but dissipation, we do need to kind of control or tame our fluid. It kind of dies faster if you increase this value. Not kind of, it will die faster if you increase this value. And I'm talking about just density, but remember, we do have temperature as well. So we need to change that in the meantime. So I'm going to go to temperature. Temperature scale is very, very low. If you want to get fire, and again, it really comes down to the scene scale. Mine is not massive. For temperature scale, I might put something like 20. I might change that. Let's see how we go. Buoyancy, I'm going to go with the same buoyancy value that I have for my density, which is 10. For dissipation, I want fire to dissipate rather quickly because it's not a flamethrower. It is a torch after all. So I want this to die soon. And we're not going to have much of a density. That's why I put dissipation to 2 here. But this one is more serious. We need to make sure that this doesn't go forever. Otherwise, it looks very unrealistic. What I tend to do, although we have a turbulence tab here, I do add a little bit of turbulence in here while I have this open. Something like 5 may do the trick. As a matter of fact, before I do that, let's see what we get. All right, that looks much better. That looks much better. It's a bit too tall still. My problem with this, and that's why I wanted to add more turbulence, because it's just too soft. As you can see, there is not much excitement happening. The flame won't go side to side. There is no interaction, and that's why we need a little bit of turbulence. Just a tad of noise, very ever so slightly. I'm actually bring back 1 to 0. Let's see what happens. Yeah, as you can see now, we have that swirl, left and right swirl. Speaking of swirl, let's go to velocity and just add a touch of swirl. That's better. Now we can see that sinus curve that is kind of happening. Still, you can't tell which one is density, which one is a temperature, which is kind of annoying. So let's address that right now. I'm going to collapse content details and go straight into shading. Now you can create a ramp, and that is very common. For now, I am going to just turn it off, and we should see something. Yeah, as you can see, now we see something. It's really not much is happening. We do see coloration because of incandescence, but the real fire is not really showing up. The reason for that is we do not have enough coming out of this source emitter. So if I go to wireframe, you can see that the amount of points that we're getting, I'm not going to call this particle because it's not particle, but the amount of points that we're getting is not much. And this points will be, I mean, that value will get controlled by rate attribute, and that rate attribute is actually sitting on this source emitter. If I go to basic emitter attribute, there we have it. We have a rate, and right now it's set to a very, very low value. I'm going to switch that to something like 600. Switch back to wireframe on shaded. Let's play back again. Now we're talking. I'm going to switch this one or increase this one to 800. Hopefully I will be getting more fire. That's more like it. And again, feel free to observe how the fire looks through references. I have already done that. Now, through emitter, basic emitter attributes, we increase the rate to 800. Now, while we have the emitter selected, let's go and increase. If I go down through fluid attribute, let's have a much thicker, richer heat. So if I go and set this one to 2, we get more white points. Of course, if you go crazy on this, then your fire will get much wilder. For now, 2 will do, and then we see how we go. We may change that actually. What I really dislike about increasing hit for each voxel per second is that fluid drop off, which is always soften the edges. And don't let the viewport fool you. You will see what I'm talking about in a sec. When you render it, it looks just nasty. So I am almost always increase the drop off to something low, like 0.5. And I don't know, I may even bring it down to something like 0.1. That's more like it. And let's play that again. Just want to know. Okay, I think we have enough turbulence. One thing I can do, I can go to fluid, into contents, detail, and turbulence. Introduce just a little bit of turbulence. It's just too hard to resist. The turbulence always creates a really nice effect, especially on the top. And that's where you want to see the realism that you're after. Maybe increase that to 0.3 to see the fire goes through left and right. Now I think it's too much. Bring it back to 0.25. Now, here's the problem. With that lovely fire, if I go to Arnold and render, surprisingly, what we are getting is not going to be identical to our viewport. Now I'll let this to render a little from another angle, which is the correct angle, camera angle, and nothing is happening. So this is, there's one area that you need to focus on to fix that, and that is shading. And hopefully by tweaking that, things should get fixed. I'm just going to create a region so I can render region this guy and hopefully improve on it. And this is something that you do trial and error. And I personally, for this particular tutorial, I'm just going to go with my own instinct and the reference that I have. And then we'll take it from there. Transparency is okay, maybe 0.2. Also edge drop off, you can use something like minus a Y gradient, get really cool effect where you get semi-transparent area down here and more transparent area there. I think for my purpose, cube will do just fine. The drop off is way too low though. I'm just going to increase that to 0.8 so we don't get as much fire at the base. Maybe 0.7. Yeah, that sounds about right. Now go to incandescence drop down. I'm gonna click so I see what I'm doing, and again it's just a matter of trial and error. What I've done in the past, I'm just gonna put that into practice. I'm not really making it up. I know what I'm doing, but again, this is something that you usually do. It really comes down to what type of fire we're looking at as well. What sort of material causes that fire. So you may want to have some blue colors in here, you may want to have some more yellowish color in here. So it really comes down to the look, and it does take time. I'm just going to increase the value on this guy, set it to something like 0.3 in here for the value, or maybe 3 even, so we get more highlights coming through. And again, this is something that I kind of need to play around with, and I'm going with the reference that I already have, and we'll see what happens. Now if I render now what I'm getting looks way more realistic. And again, there's not much happening if I change this here, but a lot can happen at the end where I can actually introduce smoke if I want to, and I don't want to, or I can kind of increase the white areas or yellow areas, something that I'm doing right now. And this is something that I kind of like. These flames, the texture is something that I'm looking for, with a little bit of orange is happening here, and having a reference always helps. Now and you can see how wild this get, these pockets of transparency rather, these are the things that you should be having in your fire, and right now I don't have it at all. So the only way to create that is to use opacity. Now I love this option because I think this creates so much power, and you can do so much using this opacity. It creates that pocket texture for you the way you want. And this is something that you kind of need to play around with. I create those spikes, and it is random. I'm not really calculating anything. I'm not memorizing the selected position per point. I'm just going with my feelings. Now I'm just gonna click on this for comparison and render again. And now you can see I'm getting some really nice textures. And that's something that I actually want to see. This is something that I really like. And it truly helps. So you can play around with these values until you get the result that you want, and you take it from there. And you may want to create more than one spike, more than 2 spikes, and I'm creating more than one. just to get more information in. The problem I have with this fire is it's just too soft. So if I stop my IPR and replay, you can see the fire is just too tame, too soft, whereas I want a wildfire. I want these flames to swirl to left and right, and I want them to go nuts. Now, one secret weapon I always have, and I do use in fluid simulation, if I were to select my fluid shape, is within a dynamic simulation tab, is that high detail solve. And that does the magic. As soon as you create, or switch to rather, all grids, then every single grid with that Navier-Stokes solver will get calculated using 2Substance, and only that. If I click, you can see now we have a much wilder fire. If I click, they can see how much detail I'm getting right now, and that's where the magic really happens for me. So if I click and render again, look at that. It looks absolutely beautiful. Again, with single frame, it doesn't do the justice. So let's cache the simulation and have a look at the render. I've actually gone ahead with the exact same parameters and exact same scene. I have rendered the whole thing with a decent AA sample and volumetric sample. So everything is been sort of denoised. But just so you know, you go to Encache, you go to create a new cache, Maya Fluid, option box, you are going to create cache for that. And once that's done, then you go to rendering submenu, and you either render sequence or you batch render it. You need to give this a much higher AA sample, something like 5. To denoise and introduce more detail, I rendered it with a 1.5K JPEG pretty much as sequence, and the result is, I'm just gonna play the result. Here is the result. So as you can see, I've got so much detail going on here. The flame, the fire looks great. You can even set some time aside and add even motion blur to that. It looks even better, but I really like the result I'm getting. Very, very cool. And I did it in no time at all, in 20 minutes. So I hope you really like this tutorial. I hope you really enjoy this tutorial. And thank you very much for watching this video, and see you guys soon in the next video, hopefully. Thank you and bye.